Welcome everyone to the CTAS Fiscal Year 2018 Purpose Area 5 Office on Violence Against Women webinar. Just a couple quick instructions before we get started. If you can please chat in the chat box where you're from, the program you represent, and if there's any other colleagues attending with you in the chat pod at this time. Next to the chat pod is presentation for download. You can click on either CTAS webinar. One of them is the actual PowerPoint, the other one is a PDF. Click on whichever one or both that you would like to download. And at the bottom it says upload file or download file for your reference for today's webinar. Also, there is a question and answer pod next to the presentation for download pod. If you have any questions that you would like to ask the presenter today, please include those questions there in the question and answer pod. Once we come to that part in the webinar, the questions will be read out loud and the presenter will answer whatever questions you have today. We have James Smith. He is going to be your presenter today. He is representing Purpose Area 5, the Office on Violence Against Women. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being on the call again. A lot of you may recognize my voice and remember me from past years, but yes, I'm back with you again, and we will attempt to get through this and hopefully enlighten you on some new information and also answer any questions that you have. The official name of the grant program for OVW under CTAS is the Grant to Indian Tribal Governments Program. We simply just refer to it as Tribal Governments Program, or i.e. Purpose Area 5. Some key dates to just get out of the way to keep, that you guys should keep on your calendars and remember, obviously we opened January 3rd, but we'll be closing on March 20th at 9 p.m. I would encourage everyone just to make sure that you try to get your application, I like to say a week beforehand, but we're going to be a little overzealous and challenge you guys to do 2 weeks this year so that if there's any technical issues, we get those sorted out before the closing. Some other key dates to keep in mind is if you need to request a paper application, that needs to be done by February 15th, and you would be contacting the Response Center, and you can find their contact information in the solicitation. And then also we strongly recommend that applicants register in GMS by February 27th. The Office on Violence Against Women, or OVW as we refer to. The mission of the Office on Violence Against Women, OVW, a component of the U.S. Department of Justice, is to provide federal leadership in developing the nation's capacity to reduce violence against women and administer justice for and strengthen services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. OVW has a variety of funding streams for Indian tribes, and those programs are listed here. I won't go through them all, but you guys can see the names of the programs listed there. And if you ever need more information on any of those, you can certainly shoot me an email. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. Here's some additional funding opportunities for tribes for OVW, so you can check those out as well. And as I said before, if you need more information on any of those, you can visit our website, or you can also reach out to me directly and I'll point you where you need to go. So what's new in 2018 for Purpose Area 5? For those of you who may have applied before, you may have noticed that OVW always had a restriction on how much of your project and your budget and your proposal could go to children and youth. I'm happy to report that this year we've completely removed that restriction. There's no restriction at all. And then also in the past, continuation applicants haven't been allowed to apply for new project areas within our program, but this year continuation applicants are allowed to apply for new or additional project areas or both outside of the original award. So that's something that's new as well. Eligibility for Purpose Area 5. You have to be a federally recognized tribe or an organization that is acting as an authorized designee of the federal recognized Indian tribe may apply. New applicants, if you've never applied, if you have never before received an OVW funding from OVW or whose last award from OVW closed within 12 months, then you're eligible to apply. And current grantees who currently have an open or active grant award from the Tribal Governments Program. Current OVW grantees. FY 2015 or earlier, an applicant who has a current OVW Tribal Governments Program award that was made in FY 15 or earlier may request funding to continue their current activities in FY 18. For FY 2016 and FY 17, in addition, applicants that received 3-year awards under the OVW Tribal Governments Program funding in FY 2016 or 2 or 3-year awards in FY 2017 are not eligible to apply for continuation awards. And I need to correct that actually. So I will just say this. Occasionally we make 2-year awards. Most of our awards are 3-year awards, but sometimes when we're making funding decisions, we either run out of money and so we're awarding what we have left, or there's a past performance issue in which we may be decreasing the award amount that an applicant requested, and it may make sense to shorten the length of the award if we're not giving them as much money. And in those cases, sometimes we drop the awards down to 2 years. If anyone is a 2016 grantee and you have a 2-year award and you got a 2-year award in 2016, we would allow you to apply. And our solicitation was updated a week ago to reflect that. And if anyone needs more information on that, or if this specifically affects you, please reach out to me with my contact information at the end of the slide, and we can go over that in more detail. Authorized designees must submit a tribal resolution or equivalent legal enactment from the tribe as part of their application. I want to say something else in addition to that. In the past, we've noticed that when tribal designees apply and they get awarded, a lot of times there's not strong or good communication between the tribe and the tribal designee. You will notice in our solicitation this year that we put additional guidance in there that it's a requirement that you establish some kind of communication plan so that the tribe knows what you're doing on its behalf. A resolution should include, resolutions should authorize the applicant to submit an application on behalf of a federally recognized Indian tribe and state that the tribe's support for the project and its commitment to participate in the project if it is selected for funding. Other resolution requirements. It must be signed by the authorizing official or officials. It must be current, and by current we mean it must reference the year in which you're applying. So if you are applying for CTAS 2018, then it needs to reference that, and then it also, the signature date needs to make sense. So we know that we typically, in the past, we've typically opened solicitations in the last part of the year going into the new year. So it would be understandable if you were diligent and got your application done early. And so you may have, for instance, or started working on it early, you may have your resolution for 18 signed at the end of 2017. That is okay. We've seen that before. But as long as it's also referencing the year in which you're applying. It must be sufficient to demonstrate authority for the applicant. So most times that's letterhead and it needs to look official. How can the funding be used? So I'll quickly go through some of these. I won't read everything. To develop and enhance effective plans for tribal government to reduce violent crimes against Indian women and increase their safety. To increase the ability of tribal government to respond to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, and stalking. And from here on out, you will not hear me say those 5 terms in that order anymore. I'll just refer to them as the 5 crimes committed against Indian women, and to strengthen the tribal criminal justice system's ability to get involved in stopping violence against Indian women. To improve services that are available to help victims of the 5 crimes. To work with the community to create education and prevention campaigns, so we're thinking of a coordinated community response here. This program is highly in favor of that and supports that as it relates to the 5 crimes. To provide supervised visitation and safe exchange programs, things that go along with that. Transitional housing is another big piece that funding can be used for. And also to provide legal advice and representation to victims of the 5 crimes. To provide services to address the needs of youth who are victims of the 5 crimes and the needs of the children and the youth exposed to the 5 crimes, including support for the non-abusing parent or caretaker of that youth. And again, I just want to reiterate that in the past, we've had a restriction on this, but this year, there's no longer a restriction. So you can focus your project heavily on children and youth. But I would encourage you to look at some support documents on the CTAS webpage that we provided for both transitional housing and youth if your programs for 2018 are going to focus on that. To develop and promote legislation and policies that enhance best practices for responding to violent crimes against Indian women, and that's including the 5 crimes that I listed at the beginning. If you have any questions about whether or not a specific activity is allowable before you submit your application, you can always contact us at tribalgrants@usdoj.gov, or you can reach out to me directly if it's related to OVW at james.smith12@usdoj.gov. And again, that information will be at the end of my presentation. Other requirements for our programs, confidentiality, a collaborative partnership. You'll be required to have support letters, and we provided examples of those and links to those in the solicitation. Victim safety and offender accountability, a travel budget requirement, and I'll just quickly touch on that. If you are an Alaskan or Alaska tribe applying, you must set aside $25,000 in your proposed budget for your proposed project for required travel as it relates to DOJ and OVW. If you're a non-Alaska tribe, then that drops down to $20,000. And if anyone has any questions about that as you're working on your applications, again, please feel free to reach out to me. Legal assistance certification requirement, and you'll be responsible for a letter of non-supplanting as well. Additional resources that will help you when applying, and also once you become a grantee if you're selected. But while you're applying, there's the CTAS 2018 frequently asked questions that has a section for our purpose area, and you'll be able to get answers to any questions you may have. A sample template is provided also on the CTAS website for our purpose area. The real template is in GMS, and the only difference between the two is the one on the website just has a watermark that says sample, and the one in GMS is the one that you'd actually be using, and it doesn't have sample written across it. But you can download it and save it to your computer and work as you would like. Other templates that you'll be required to submit, timeline and things like that, can also be found on the CTAS webpage, and they're very clearly labeled. If anyone has any trouble, certainly reach out to the response center or me. Also, there's a guide to understanding Purpose Area 5. OVW program contact information. So, as I mentioned before, if there's any questions specific to Purpose Area 5, or any larger CTAS questions, you can send them to tribalgrants@usdoj.gov. If it's specifically related to OVW, you can still send it there, or you can email me at james.smith12@usdoj.gov, or you can call OVW's main number and ask for me, and that number is 202-307-6026. That is the end of my formal presentation. At this point in time, I will be taking any questions that you may have, and also using the opportunity to provide any tips or suggestions that I may have for you. I am also fortunate enough to have my wonderful finance colleague on this call with me, Suhaila Lasky, who is here to also answer any budget questions you may have. And Suhaila, feel free to jump in with any proactive information you might want to share with grantees regarding that topic as well.
Great, thank you. Yes, I'm here to answer any financial questions. If you just want to, any grantees want to go ahead in the Q&A section, just type them out and we'll be able to respond. Thank you.
Right now, it looks like we have one question in the chat. Please remember, if you have any question whatsoever, type them in the question and answer pod. The first question that I see in the chat, will a tribal consortium need to collect tribal resolutions in addition to a tribal consortium resolution?
I'm going to err on the side of caution and say yes. That way you're covered and we don't have to come back and ask you for anything. I've never actually had someone ask me that direct question before, but I think it's safe to say to collect them on each of the tribes that are a part of that. I would say it's safe to collect a tribal resolution for each one of those tribes that are being represented, yes.
All right, could you please clarify the difference between Purpose Area 5 and Purpose Area 7?
Yes, give us 1 second, please. So for Purpose Area 5, our tribal governments program is really a broad program. As you can see, for the amount of things that I listed the funding could be used for, it's very broad. I don't work for Purpose Area 7, but just in my experience with it, it tends to be not as broad, and it doesn't cover every single thing that you can get under Purpose Area 5. Like, for instance, you can hire a police officer or a cop under OBW's Purpose Area, but I'm pretty sure you can't do that in Purpose Area 7. That's just one small example. However, I would encourage the person that asked that question, whenever you get a chance to read the solicitation, I would just maybe cut and paste in Word, like both of those sections side by side, and you can see literally what the differences are, or just go in and read each of those individual purpose areas. I think both purpose areas pages are like, maybe 5 or 6 pages, nothing long. But I'm really not the Purpose Area 7 representative, so I can't speak a whole lot to that. But I do encourage you to read their section of the solicitation and OBW's, and you should be able to see the difference very clearly, in addition to the things that I've already named.
Are there resources to have someone review our application prior to submittal to ensure all the requirements are met?
So, technically, as federal employees, we are not legally allowed to read your applications and review them and critique them in any way prior to submitting, because it would be considered giving an unfair advantage to someone. However, we can answer, basic questions or questions that would be considered general knowledge to everyone. We can tell you what things should be in per the solicitation, like what requirements. We're also going to have a checklist webinar, I think it's our last webinar, where we go over everything that's supposed to be in the application, what you should have there. Also, if you applied last year, I encourage you to get a copy of your peer review comments and go through those and compare your new application to that to make sure that the areas that, peer reviewers may have said that your application was good, that they continue to be good in this new application, and areas where they say it was bad or needed improvement, that you make sure that you've improved in those areas for your 2018 application. Also, as interesting and strange as what this may sound what I'm about to say, any representative for any purpose area can talk to you about a prior year's application that's already gone through the review process. So if that helps you in any way, I encourage you to do that as well. But we can't talk to you about anything that you're submitting for this current year. Like, we can't review it in any way.
And one thing that we encourage, and I know we have a online grant writing tool that also encourages this, but basically you might want to get maybe a friend or someone that's on your team to review your application, just to kind of make sure that that it makes sense, that it's clear, concise. But we would recommend that you have either a buddy or someone that you work with review that before you submit it.
And then also on the CTAS webpage, and that's referenced throughout the solicitation. We have a past or previous successful application packet, which is an application from each purpose area that scored really high. And by really high, I mean probably like 90s, or if it was an office that did tiers, then it was in tier 1. And so that's a good indication. Again, I encourage you not to copy those, and we've redacted those very heavily. But the purpose of those is to give you an idea of what we've considered good applications in the past. And so I think they can serve as some framework.
Budget template. Where can this be found?
So we technically don't have a budget template, and we removed that from the solicitation. Now, let me correct myself. We do. It's in GMS, and you can download that at any point and save it to your computer and start to work on that. So you can get it from there, but we didn't put a sample of that on the CTAS webpage or anything like that. If the applicant wants that, all they simply have to do is go into GMS and download it, and they can use that to work on. But we didn't actually just take a copy of it and put sample on it and put it out there on the web. We didn't do that. But you can log into GMS and get it as if you were applying. And since someone brought, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to go to the next question. You go ahead and finish.
Oh, okay. So I was also going to say that we redesigned the workbook this year a little bit with the latest technologies from Microsoft, so I think it looks really, really good. We've added it so you'll be able to see budget totals on each tab, and so I think it's really good. So I'm hoping that you guys really enjoy working with it this year, and so that's all I wanted to say on that.
Okay, next question. Can we hire a police officer to conduct sex trafficking investigations and stings to address sex trafficking victims?
Yes, you certainly can hire a police officer to do that. Now, surface level I'm saying yes, but of course when I get your application, we would need to see like in writing what that actually looks like. So if it's written in a way that's not allowable or unacceptable, we would let you know. But my answer in saying yes is a surface level answer. Yes, you can do it, depending on how you write it out and how you frame it.
Okay, next question. James, you mentioned we need to provide proof that the tribes need to be aware of activities we are providing under CTAS for the resolution. Can you give an example of what you're looking for?
So what I was saying, so the resolution and the first part of that person's question is two different things. So any tribe applying is always going to need to submit a resolution. And then any tribal designee that's applying is going to need to submit, a resolution as well if they're applying on behalf of the tribe. But what I was trying to say, and maybe it didn't come through clearly, is that in the past, when we have just learned from experience that when there's a tribal designee who applies and does the grant on behalf of the tribe, a lot of times our experience has been that the tribe, outside of applying, throughout the life of the grant, the tribe and the tribal designee haven't really been in communication. The tribe doesn't really know what's going on. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen this year. So if you give me 1 second, I'll just get to what that language says. It's very basic, but I just want to point out to you what we did say in regards to that. Just give me 1 second. So in the past, we just had, what do we have here for tribal designee? One, authorize the applicant to submit an application on behalf of the federal recognized Indian tribe. Two, state the tribe support for the project. In the past, that's what you've always seen in our solicitations. We still have that, but we added a third point to say, state how information sharing will occur to ensure the tribe is informed about project implementation and its impact on tribal individuals, families, and communities. So basically, if you're a tribal designee, you need to be reporting back to the tribe on your activities, how you're doing on the grant, if you're doing what you say you're doing, in addition to reporting back to OVW. So when you write this application, we want to know what you're going to put in place to make sure that that happens. So we're going to be looking for that.
All right, next question. Can we hire a public defender to provide legal services for victims?
We do some stuff in legal services. The person that has that question, can you do me a favor and email me that question directly? Because surface level, yes, but I want to talk it over with my legal team. And I also just want to understand the context a little bit more. So if that person could shoot me an email at james.smith12@usdoj.gov, I'll get them a more definitive answer, but surface level, yes.
Next question. Looking at the solicitation samples such as letters of support, are you looking that the same wording be used and then just adding our specific tribal information, or is this just a guide and we should write our own letter of support?
It's a guide. It's certainly, by all means, take what you can take from it, but we're expecting each tribe's letter to be different because each of your partnerships will be different. So we don't want you to take our template so much so that it doesn't look like it's a partnership and it just says names. We want you to clearly spell out what that partnership is going to look like. So just use our sample as exactly that, a sample and a guide, but the letter should take on what exactly is taking place between the two entities. Hopefully that makes sense.
Next question. Usually when you get a tribal resolution for a consortium, we have to provide a full presentation in front of all of our tribal leaders in the state before they approve.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that's a question. Is that informing me of something or is it asking me something?
It looks like it's just informing you of something.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm gathering from that comment is that the person is trying to convey to me that it's a long process and it takes time. And I've heard that before. I would strongly encourage that person, if you're thinking about applying, to get started on that process now.
Okay, next question. I have a budget question. We are finding that direct client services are really helpful, needed, and hard to anticipate exact costs. When it comes to direct client services, is it okay to have a budget line item that is generalized? Something like direct client service such as XYZ at an average of so much a month without being super specific.
Tuhela?
That's a really great question. And, I actually received that question recently from a grantee. And, the reason why we need some specifics on what you anticipate to include in that and is because there are so many things that are not allowable, and we want to help to prevent any unallowable costs from being incurred so that you don't have to come back and pay for it, later on if it's determined to be unallowable. So we want to be able to help identify those costs before they're incurred. And I was also asked if we have a list of costs that are allowable, and we do not. And the reason why is just because every community is very unique and different, and the needs are different for every community. So it would be impossible to come up with an entire list. But what I would recommend is, base it off of historical information as far as listing examples of costs that you anticipate. Like if you anticipate providing transportation vouchers or security deposits or food for victims that are, fleeing their situation. If those are the kinds of things that I would recommend including. And then if we have any questions when we're reviewing the budget, we'll ask you specifically about them. Also, if you have like a general idea of, what the cost is, like you anticipate maybe $50 a month for transportation needs, those kinds of things. And I don't need you to be incredibly specific, but we do need some information about some of the costs that you anticipate that we can, like I said, we can just make sure that they are not unallowable.
Okay, next question. Can we use funds to provide stipends for a crisis intervention team to respond to victims?
I would, from a financial perspective, we generally stay away from stipends because they're not allowable with the grant funds. But you can compensate people for costs that they incur as a result of their participation in a program. So if they incur transportation costs, you can reimburse them for those. Maybe I can provide a little bit more information. James, do you know what type of activity that is? If I have a little information.
And that's the thing. It's hard for me to give a blanket answer for that. So again, the person asking the question, if you could send me an email spelling out exactly what you're thinking, the more specifics and details we have around your question, we can get you a more definitive answer. Your question is a little vague, so I hear what you're asking, and based on the way that you're asking it, I would agree with Suhaila, we stay away from stipends, but if maybe we could get a little bit more about what you're thinking or what exactly you're asking in more detail, we'll be able to make sure we're giving the right answer or a more definitive answer.
Okay, next question. Is it possible to get feedback from a previous application for Purpose Area 5 that was declined?
Yes, absolutely. You can request your peer review comments from the peer reviewers, and yes, just reach out to me and let me know what year you're referring to. I would need to know what year it was that you applied and what state you're in and the tribe's name and all that good stuff.
Could you please repeat where the sample past successful grant applications are located?
So it's on the CTAS, the main CTAS page. I'll tell you in 1 second I don't want to spell out the whole. I think my colleague just typed it in, so hopefully they'll be able to see it on the screen. But I'll tell you a quick, easy way to get there for anyone who's looking for it. If you just go to Google or Yahoo and type in CTAS 2018, it'll take you directly to the page that I'm talking about. And you'll see it'll have the solicitation, the sample narratives, the sample abstract, the application packet. It'll have a rack of documents there for you to assist you with your application.
Okay, next question. Cultural and traditional practices are listed last in the list of victim services. Does this reflect a preference in what is considered more fundable?
Nope, not at all. It's just the way they're randomly listed. There's no rhyme or reason behind it.
Next question. Can we hire a police officer to address domestic violence crimes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would just caution though, when if you're going to request a police officer, when you're writing your narrative and you're doing your budget, you need to be very detailed. Don't be vague. But yes, surface level, yes, you could hire a police officer for that. I would say it would be very wise and smart if you know that your tribal community, let's just say there's 5 crimes that we like to focus on at OVW and in the tribal unit. But let's just say, for example, that sex trafficking and DV are your most common 2. I would probably write your information or your narrative about the police officer and requesting that to focus on those with supporting materials and things. That would make it a strong case. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, and it looks like, Keisha, looking on the OVW website, I cannot find the CTAS solicitation. Can you please tell me where I can find it? And looks like Tenzin did respond. We'll get that link, we'll get that into the chat so everybody will be able to see it. Just bear with us. We'll put that in there for you. And also, could James please repeat his email address, or shall I write to tribalgrants@usdoj.gov? And yes, also, please send all your questions related to the 2018 CTAS solicitation. And that's also at the bottom. You can also contact the 1-800 number, 421-6770, if you want to call them toll free. Next question. Thanks for the answer, and I have a few more budget follow-up questions that might be more specific. Could you please provide the contact or email address for the budget contact person, please? Yes, Elizabeth, we'll get that to you also. Next question. Our board members are the presidents or the designee of each of our tribes, so is a resolution from them adequate?
Can you repeat the question?
Our board members are the designees of each of our tribes, so is a resolution from them adequate?
Let me get back to that. If that person could send me that question to me directly, because I don't want to say, personally I think it is, but before I just go ahead and say that it is, I want to just verify with my legal team, because I've never actually had someone ask me that question in that way. So I just want to make sure I'm getting you the correct information. So the person that, Pearl, if you can hear me, if you could just send that directly to my email address at james.smith12@usdoj.gov, I'll make sure to get you an answer.
Okay, great. Next question. At one point, there was a requirement through DOJ that if a victim is assisted with housing costs, that we have to support them for a minimum of 6 months. I am not seeing that requirement anywhere this year. Is there still a policy like that in the place?
It is still in place.
All righty. It looks like there's a question in the chat. Is there a way we can provide rental assistance that's not transitional housing or limited to first month's rent and deposit?
I'm going to say no, but I'm also going to double check, because typically it's transitional housing or exactly what the individual that asked the question listed there. So anything outside of that I need to look into. So Vicki, shoot me that same question in an email and I'll give you a more definitive answer. But I'm leaning towards a no.
Next question. Can you send me the response to that answer as well about the resolution from our board of directors being sufficient? And that was Bonnie.
Sure, Bonnie. But I have to be honest with you. I may forget if you don't shoot me an email. So if you could just shoot me an email saying, can you provide that? I'll make sure you get it.
Okay, we have a couple of more. We have a little bit more time. If you have any additional questions, please type them in the question and answer pod. Also, if you look at the bottom left side of your screen, we have a webinar survey. If you click on that link and click Browse To, it will take you directly to our webinar survey for today. Please fill that out and let us know how we did today. Also, the presentation for download again, you can upload the file or download the file. Both of the files are available there for you. If you need to contact DOJ, you can contact them at the DOJ Response Center at travelgrants@usdoj.gov or call them directly, toll-free, 1-800-421-6770.
So I don't think we have any more questions at the moment, so I'm just going to throw out some things that I think would be helpful for all of you. If you're applying to Purpose Area 5, remember if you are a tribe in Alaska, you must include $25,000 for required OBW travel, DOJ travel, in your budget. If you are not an Alaska tribe, then that requirement is $20,000. So please make sure that that is in there. In your budget, please allot for new grantee orientation and for the annual tribal summit. Those will be two requirements, absolutely, that you have to go to once you're awarded with this grant. Let me take the opportunity to explain how new grantee orientations work, because I always get this question in terms of when you are budgeting for them or if it's something that's required. So CTAS, the Coordinated Travel Assistance Solicitation, is not a program. It's just the umbrella in which 9 different programs operate under. Some of those programs, or purpose areas as we'd like to call them, have additional requirements. So I will say this, for Purpose Area 5, we have a mandatory OBW orientation. If you get, let's just say you get awarded for OBW Purpose Area 5 in 2018, and that's the only purpose area that you get awarded to, then it's optional for you if you want to go to the larger CTAS orientation. If you want to go, you can go. I'll be there presenting. But you absolutely have to go to the OBW mandatory Purpose Area 5 new grantee orientation. That is not optional. On the flip side, if you get awarded in 2018 for OBW, and let's just say OBC or any other purpose area, then going to the overall CTAS orientation then becomes a requirement for you, as well as the OBW mandatory orientation. Hopefully that makes sense. If anybody has a question about that, please feel free to reach out to me. But I just wanted to clarify that because I know we often get questions about that. I would also, sorry?
There was a question that came in about the conference. Is the conference still on in San Diego? Just wondering because of the government shutdown. And
as of right now, sorry, go ahead.
He was just wanting to know, yeah, if it was still on.
Yeah, as of right now, it's still on.
Okay, and is there a breakdown of costs for the mandatory trainings?
Do you want me to chime in, James?
Yeah, sorry, Savella, you want to take that?
Yeah, so we don't have a required breakdown of costs. What we recommend are that grantees, that they use large, like if your travel policies go by the GSA locality per diem, and that's where the costs of per diem and lodging are dependent upon what GSA identifies for the areas that you travel to. So I would choose large cities like Washington, D.C. or Chicago or something that has a higher per diem just when you're estimating the budget. And so just for like the figures, so if you're trying to figure out per diem, then you would use maybe like $70 a day and then $200 for lodging, just so that you're budgeting enough money for it. And then how many people you think that you're going to send. So if you have 3 people that you know that you're going to send, then use 3 people and maybe 5 days or 4 days. Again, it's just a budget. So you're not going to be held to those exact figures. You're going to, at the end of the day, follow your internal policies and procedures for travel costs. So, I mean, you're still following what you need to be following. So you are still breaking down the figures in the budget, but you can use estimated figures and also estimated destinations. And one thing I did want to also add about the travel section is that for the required total, so if you have the required amount of $20,000, to make sure that those are for your travel costs that are related to attending the OVW-sponsored trainings or the OVW-required trainings. And you can absolutely request reimbursement for local program-related mileage. It just cannot go towards that $20,000 or $25,000 requirement for OVW travel. So just keep that in mind when you're putting your budget together. It is allowable, but it cannot be part of the OVW required travel.
Just some other things that I kind of noticed from budgets in the past and looking at them. I would encourage everyone, if you're thinking about applying to, whether it's our purpose area or any purpose area really, but since I'm representing purpose area 5 today, I'll just say for OVWs, just please make sure that, you know, your narrative matches up with your Excel document, that your numbers, you know, equate to what you're saying in words and vice versa. They just need to match up. I would strongly encourage you to just use one document, the Excel template that we provided, and put your narrative in there. However, I know some of you like also writing a separate Word document. That is fine. I'm not telling you you can't do that, but what I am telling you is that if you choose to submit 2 documents, make sure that they match up. And I would clearly go over that, and that's not an exercise that you should be doing the night before it closes. So that's why I'm challenging everyone to get your application in 2 weeks in advance. But just make sure that anything you're asking for is clearly laid out. Also, stay away from words like refreshments and, you know, things that send red flags you don't want to include in your budget. You know, if you're requesting cars and things like that, there's, you know, Suhaila, I don't know if you want to speak to how they have to do the whole lease thing and
yeah, I can talk about that. I can go through each of the categories and kind of just pick out a few things that I've noticed
Sure.
that they're helpful for us when we're reviewing the budget so that we can just expedite things. And then I'll also get to the vehicle as well. So for the personnel section, just make sure that that's for your direct office staff or for your tribe if you're applying through the tribe. If you have partners in the community and you're reimbursing them for their costs, or if you are contracting for services in, you know, locally and you have their time as well, if they're not direct staff of your organization, then they get categorized in the consultants and contracts. So the personnel section is strictly just for your staff, and you're going to show their hourly and salary rates and the percentage of time, and the Excel document does a good job of breaking that down easily. And then the fringe benefits, those are just associated with the staff that are listed in personnel. The travel section, we talked about the 20,000, excuse me, 20 and 25,000 depending on your location. If you are including the cost of a vehicle, which is generally considered in the, are categorized in the equipment section, that's if you end up purchasing it. But if you are leasing a vehicle, that's going to be allocated in the consultants and contracts category, and that's because it's a contractual agreement that you have. So, you know, if you purchase it's an equipment because you're following all your inventory procedures, but then if it is leased, then put it in the contractual category. And if you have a vehicle that you're requesting, any large purchases with federal funds, they require a lease versus purchase analysis, and that would be the same principle that would apply to, let's say you have a copier machine that's a large purchase and you have a significant or a strong justification to need that. you would also provide a lease versus purchase analysis. So it's really for any large item. And what that is you are obtaining quotes for both a lease and a purchase of comparable vehicles, and providing a supplemental document like in Word. You would have the analysis, or Excel, whatever software you want to use. But it's an analysis where you identify the different costs and you include everything that you might incur, and then identify what is the most cost-effective measure that you are selecting. So if it, I know that some tribes are able to lease through GSA, and sometimes it's significantly cheaper. And then there's other tribes that don't have that same opportunity, so the purchase might be cheaper in that case. So you definitely need to include that in the analysis. What's really the best way to maximize these funds, and that's just a supplemental document that you can include with your application package when you submit that. And then moving on to supplies, one thing, this is where you would include your laptop or computer if you have that, as long as it's under the capitalization threshold for your organization. For the federal government, ours is $5,000. So if you just double check your tribe's capitalization threshold, and if your laptops, computers, everything is under your threshold, then you can include that in supplies and not, and that's one of the new changes since 2015. This category also, it's helpful for us if you break down your supplies by line, in your line item. If you have general office supplies, that's one line item. And then if you have program-specific supplies or culturally specific supplies, or supplies that are specific for your healing circles or healing groups, or if there are supplies that are specific to that if they are identified separately, just so that, because I know that it can add up quickly, so we're just able to see the difference in the cost, and it's not just in one line item that it looks like $10,000 for supplies, but when you break it down further, you can see, okay, that's only maybe like $3,000 for general office supplies, and $3,000 for this and $2,000 for that over the course of 3 years. It's a lot more reasonable. So if you just, this is a general guidance by breaking the supplies down by a little bit more than just, supplies, but giving some sort of support as far as, or identification as what those costs are, what the supplies costs are for. Another category we have is the other category, and that's the last of the direct categories. And this is where it's kind of like a catch-all. You'll have a lot of your other types of costs that you incur, like rent, registration fees, your client and survivor services, your participant support costs. Those are the kinds of costs that you'll have in that category. And just to provide, even if the breakdown isn't provided as if you're not going into like a super breakdown in the worksheet, like what James was saying, is to really provide a good level of detail and support in the narrative portion, because I know that there are some limitations with the Excel spreadsheet that's provided with the through the program. So I know you can't like break it down a lot more than what the cells are already providing. So the narrative is where you can provide a lot more detail, a lot more breakdown of your different costs, just to support them. And then the last category is indirect costs, and that's where you will include your indirect cost rate, or if you're using the de minimis rate, you can include that in that category as well. And just make sure to also attach your most recent or current indirect cost rate agreement. And if by the time we review your budget, the agreement that was submitted with the application is no longer current, then we will contact you to request a current rate agreement so that you can send it to us by email. And if you're a returning grantee, then I'm sure you know this whole process already. So if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them, or if you have anything else.
There is one.
Also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there was one question that came through real quick. Did you say that the budget narrative can be included inside the budget template you provide this year?
So I'm curious if they are referring to like if you can embed a Word document or not, but the answer for that is no. But each of the categories has a large section where you can enter narrative data below the worksheet portion for that category. So like let's say, for example, the supplies category, there's the worksheet portion where they enter it, the grantee can or the applicant can enter all of the line items and the computations, and then below it is a box where all the narrative, where the detail is, where they can enter in that information.
Also, I wanted to make it very clear that if you've never before applied for funding under the Tribal Governments Program, or your last grant with us closed more than 12 months ago or a year ago, you can only apply for $450,000. Excuse me, you can't apply for more than that. If you are a current grantee who's eligible to apply, we can't guarantee that you would get more than $900,000, but you're welcome to apply to up to that amount. I would also encourage, we have the purpose area and abstract templates. Please, 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 please make sure that you give us a good, strong abstract of the project you are proposing. And OBW's abstract template is very similar to all of the other purpose areas, at least the first section of it. But then if you look at the bottom of that, that we provided like samples of how you could go about kind of writing it or filling in the information. But please make sure that you fill that in good. Just don't give us 1 or 2 or 3 sentences. We need to get a good idea of what your project is in a brief statement. That's very, very important to us. Please also make sure that you're providing correct contact numbers and email addresses for folks. If you know that someone has left since you've submitted your application, please reach out to us and let us know that information so that we don't spend a lot of time reaching out to someone who no longer works for your tribe. And thus, that delays things like getting your budget approved, that delays funding decisions on whether or not we're going to fund you. It could be a variety of things. So I just encourage you to do that.
Okay, we've got, looks like 3 final questions that came in. So that's a yes. We can use the template you provide this year to include all of the budget information and use the space below to enter the narrative information. No need to have a separate Word document budget narrative.
No need to, but again, no, you don't need to, but I also want to be clear that for those who choose to, you can certainly do that. I don't want anyone to think that they can't, but no, it's not required that you submit 2 separate documents.
I would say from a perspective where I review these budgets on a daily basis, I feel like the area that's provided in the actual document, the Excel spreadsheet, I feel like it's sufficient. So yeah, I don't want anybody to feel like they have to provide an additional narrative to support it.
Okay, does OVW cover human trafficking?
Yes.
All right. Can you give an example of how you would like to see office supplies broken down, such as pens, paper, for 3 years? Do you need a source of where we get our cost info? And if you are doing cultural support groups and want to provide a moccasin making class with that, how would you like the cost of the buckskin broken down, and how would we provide you the source of where you would purchase it?
Okay, so the source for your purchase, for your procurement of your supplies, you do not need to provide that information. So what in the scenario that was just presented, what I would recommend is that you would have one line item for general office supplies, which would include those examples of the paper and pens and, toner and everything that's used. and then another line item for your healing group supplies. I'm sorry, I forget what the actual title of that group was, but if you have like a regular group that meets maybe either weekly or 3 times a month, or that you have a general idea or an estimate of how many times you think they're going to meet a month. It's like, think of it from that perspective. So, okay, so let's say you have a group that'll meet maybe once a week, right? And you anticipate that maybe the cost will be $40 per time that you meet. So 52 times $40, so that's around $2,000 a year. And so you can, times 3 years. And so like that's an example of how you would come up with those costs, to estimate those costs. And in the narrative, you can include that breakdown of how you estimated it and an example of costs that are included. So if you have the types of supplies that you anticipate, a general estimated cost per meeting, and maybe, say that you anticipate 2 to 5 people per meeting. And honestly, I'm really just pulling these numbers out of the air. I have no idea what the costs are for these items, so I could be way off. So I just want to also caveat that. And if any grantee or any applicant wants to have a discussion about how to allocate costs for general office supplies, which are supplies that if they're shared by other staff in that same office that don't charge their time to the grant, then those costs need to be allocated. And I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody offline, or if you want to contact our help desk, we can provide some more guidance, or you can wait to see if you're awarded. You can ask more information at that time. But you would want to allocate those shared costs so that you're spreading the cost equally in a manner that distributes it equitably across all the funding sources.
Okay, we are over time. However, we do have one last question. We can get it answered real quick. Is there a maximum cap on the indirect cost rate?
There is no cap on the indirect cost rate. You will follow the rate that you were approved with, and if it changes throughout the course of the award, then you will course correct for the new rate that's approved. And in the budget, when you submit the application, you can use the figures that are in the rate that is most current that you have at that time.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody today for joining the webinar. Again, if you need to have any additional questions, you can contact the DOJ Response Center at tribalgrants@usdoj.gov, or call them toll-free at 1-800-421-6770. We will leave the window open for about 3 to 5 more minutes. Please click on the survey link and let us know how you did today, and also do not forget to